Well, speaking of the NFC North teams, we're going to speak about one who did tragically lose a couple players on Sunday, the
Yep.
Lions. They lost
Yeah.
Mr. Knuckles. Sonic is missing his Knuckles.
They did. He actually had a press conference today. I'm not saying that he's probably done for the year, but he did have a press conference today at one of his charity events that said they're still looking into things that he may not be done for the playoffs, but even if he does come back to the playoffs with an MCL injury, it's never a sure thing that you're going to come back right, especially if he rushes back. Very big loss for them. Him and Gibbs were dynamic. Obviously, people call them Sonic and Knuckles, but I more or less like the Thunder and Lightning analogy as a Giant fan, just because I used to have that with Bradshaw and Jacobs. But huge loss for the Lions, and you can touch on this too. Their entire defense pretty much has been injured the entire year, and they continue to get injured.
Yeah, I believe they just lost a defensive tackle. His last name is Williams. I know, but he's been playing very well for them, causing a lot of pressure, and
Yep.
he's out for the year too. It does suck because what made no sense to me is I didn't think David Montgomery was out for the year because he came back in the game.
He did.
He came back in the game. I think he ran like 3 plays in, and he got out. And I thought, hey, they're down by a good margin. They're just gonna bench him, see how he is next week. And then I hear that he's out for the year, which was like, it was shocking to me. I wasn't expecting it.
Yep.
But I do think, well, this is the one thing I have to ask you is, do you think that this does affect their team, like in general? Like, do you think like they still have the high value that they are in the NFC?
I still think they're the top of the class in the NFC, yes. However, these injuries, they do pile up, especially for teams who are of this caliber, because you could see it the last couple of weeks, their offense is still absolutely dynamic, but their defense has been depleted so much. They have now injured, if I'm reading this correctly, 11 starting players on the defensive end have been ruled out for the season, which is unbelievable. So they're
Insane.
basically working with second stringers and rookies on the defensive side of the ball. The only caveat here is that if you want to look at any of like the bright lights and the shining glimmers here and all of those injuries, Aiden Hutchinson did say on a podcast today that he would be ready for the Super Bowl.
Just I'm on track for my goal of returning for the Super Bowl. And so I keep telling all the boys when I see him in the facility, I'm like, you guys just got to get there, and I promise you, I'm gonna be back.
I mean, if you want to look at any bright spot, right, you still have to go through 3 rounds of the NFC playoffs, but these injuries do catch up to you. I think they're going to be fine on the offensive side of the ball. I really do. They have a lot of dynamic players, especially with Gibbs leading the back. I completely trust him to
Me
do
too.
that. It's just on the defensive side of the ball, which can really bite you in the ass, especially when you try to get into high scoring games like this, like they just did with the Bills. You're probably going to come out on the losing end of that if your defense can't get stops.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is like the Lions did base like when they had like the running when they had Montgomery and Gibbs, they based it off of first drive Montgomery. It 95% of the time is first drive Montgomery, Gibbs, and then they
Yep.
switch off depending on the schemes. Now I feel like they're gonna have to like not change their player playbook in the entirety, but like
Hmm.
alternate like where's Gibbs gonna be inputted and who's gonna be in place of Montgomery
Yeah.
because it's hard to find a because Montgomery is a very good running back. He is, in my eyes, I think he's very underrated for the guy because he gets obviously overshadowed by Gibbs because Gibbs is obviously Sonic. He's the fast guy. That's what you look for in the NFL. And then there's Montgomery, who's like the Derrick Henry esque type of player.
Yeah.
But
The only issue with your what you're saying is I don't know who's out there to kind of take that role of, a hard 1 yard, 2 yard back in the NFL who's still a free agent at this point in the year.
that's like I don't know who they have in their practice squad. And for all you know, they could have some like guy coming out of their practice squad or some fourth string running back. I don't know. But I think that it would benefit them if they do try to get someone who could implement just like Montgomery would. A big guy who would be able to run downfield like if to gain like after contact pretty much.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I just think that Gibbs is more than capable of taking on the full load here, and he will because of how dynamic he is. Like I said, I don't think the offense is going to be an issue here. I just think it's the defensive side of the ball that you're going to have trouble with because you can't sustain this, especially come playoff time. You don't want to get into a shootout come playoff time. I mean, you scored in the last two games combined 76 points and you lost one of them.
That's crazy.
Like that's not sustainable, especially come playoff time when you're going to have to play most likely the Eagles, when you're going to have to play either the Vikings or the Packers. That's going to be a scary thought to have when you want to get into a shootout because all those teams I just named have dynamic offenses with very good skill players,
Yeah.
and you don't want to get into a shootout with them.
Yeah. No, yeah, I do agree with that you obviously don't want to get into a shootout, but obviously the defense I feel like Dan Campbell is going to be able to fix. I think
Hmm.
that's fine because obviously they went against two high-powered offenses these past 2 weeks, the Packers
Yep.
and the Bills. So those are
Hmm.
two rough weeks. I think these next two upcoming weeks are easier, I believe. Than
It's the Bears and the 49ers. So yes, you should have an easier time going into that. And then you end the season on the Vikings, which at that point it may not mean anything. However, the Vikings and the Detroit are tied right now, so that may be a shootout too.
yeah, it all depends on how. For all you know, that could be for the division,
I know.
which is crazy to say because it's possible. I believe I don't know how many losses the Packers have 4 losses or 3.
The Packers are 10-4,
Yeah.
which
So
is unbelievable.
so two say if the Vikings lose two more or the God forbid the Lions lose two more, it's a 3 team to decide for the division. I
Yep.
do think obviously this might be like a little bias coming out of me. I do think that the Eagles, if they maintain like the way like they are, I think they will take the number 1 seed. But I do think the Lions will be the number 2 seed because they're deep. Because I feel like if, as you said, the defense was a massive factor, losing all these guys. It does
Well, I just named who the Lions are playing these last 3 weeks in, the 49ers, the Bears, and the Vikings. The Eagles have a 15,000 times easier schedule,
exactly.
right?
That's what I'm saying.
They're going against the Commanders this next week, which let's be honest here, they should kill the Commanders on how the Commanders are playing and how the Eagles are playing right now. And then they have the Cowboys and the Giants, which should just be rollover wins.
Yeah,
So if as long as they don't choke themselves out of a first round bye, I completely agree with you. They should just kind of coast into it.
yeah. All right. Well, moving on from the NFL, I do want to talk about